Hello, my name is Torsten Kleinz, and I'm a freelance journalist, and that means that I'm really ready for vacation, and that's let's start. I spoke about online advertising last year, and I will give you an update what happened in this last year, and then I will relate to the conference topic and will explain why the advertising is so important and why we have to understand how advertising works even more, because it's important. So the hashtag for this is "The Internet is for ads." In the last year, I was talking a lot of ad blockers, about ad blockers, and I gave you a little review. This is the first ad blocker in Germany in 1998, and the most interesting in the last year is that the business model of the company Eine in Cologne that has the business model of acceptable ads, and which means that they distinguish between acceptable advertising and non-acceptable advertising. So acceptable advertising can pass the ad blocker, and this means that about 30% is passed through, and therefore the IO wants money for that. So there were some lawsuits. There were in Munich and Cologne, and last year there was the state that IO won all but one lawsuit, and at the last lawsuit in Cologne, they said that we can see an aggressive business methods and therefore unfair business conduct, and therefore I went on to Karlsruhe, to the upper court in Karlsruhe, and I went there and had a look at it, and the result was pretty clear. The judges said this model is that the Axel Springer publishing house describes as unfair, but the court said it's basically just a change in the market, and they have to accept it. In front of before the court process, the question was pretty clear, pretty open on how it would end, but the highest court in Germany said that this is pretty fine, and Axel Springer Verlag said that they don't want to accept this, so they're going to in front of the Constitutional Court. They want to, and they don't want to go. They wanted to basically talk. They want to claim copyright. If you change the DOM tree, you're basically violating copyright. So that's their argument. What was problematic for Axel Springer and they started to use countermeasures 2 or 3 years ago. If you want to go to Bild with an ad blocker, then you will see this this message. You can't visit Bild today with the ad blocker anymore, and these ad blockers are pretty widespread. Spiegel Online, for example, has introduced one of them, and a lot of publishing houses are introducing paywalls. So the free, because the free model is on the withdrawal, because 50% of ad blocker of visits are blocked by ad blockers, and the question here is how many people use the ad blockers, and now how many people work for the advertising industry. Web designers, app developers have an interface for that, or not that much. There's an interface between the intersection between those who live from advertising money and those who use ad blockers. This shows that the whole business model of advertising is problematic. The one form of advertising that one form is the retargeting. If you've been to an if you've ever been to an online retail, for example, you will have seen that on other websites such as Facebook, you will see the same adverts. There was an interesting fight last year. Contrary to platforms like Springer, Facebook has a different model because they don't have an ad server. You can block advertisements pretty easy because you block them the adverts from a certain server IP. But so until last year, ad blockers had a problem to block adverts on Facebook, and then some advert blockers started to try it again, and then Facebook changed their code again, and then Facebook stopped complaining or to defending themselves. So now ad blockers will also work on Facebook. That might also be because Facebook has other problems right now, such as Cambridge Analytica and the whole election in the USA. So that was the main problem for Facebook, and maybe maybe that's the reason that Facebook doesn't fight ad blockers that much anymore. So,
I also told you last year about how auctions for marketing real estate happen within microseconds after you visit a website. So, for example, you're browsing for a Pokemon website, and the website asks, hey, Coca-Cola, do you maybe want to deliver some ads to this Pokemon fan? And this is an overview of the advertising marketplace from 2010, and this is how it looked last year, with 3,000 companies involved. And I said, yeah, well, I guess the advertising industry has now realized that this is just too much. With all these companies trying to build their own data silos, their own interfaces, pushing them to the market, with everyone trying to win their own partners for advertising, this can't be healthy. And that was shared sentiment at all advertising conferences. And the result of that, of course, means that we're now at 5,000 different companies. And I would say that there are a lot of ad blockers which are part of the advertising industry by now. Because ad blockers live on the advertising industry, anonymous search engines live on it, which means that the whole web ecosystem is financed by advertising, and one could even say infected by it. Another interesting development from last year was Apple saying, yeah, well, we're issuing browser, we're selling computers, so we think that we are responsible, that users of our browsers are not that concerned with tracking, so we limit the use of tracking cookies, at least a little bit. And all trade organizations said, well, Apple, you can't do that. You have to conserve the web system as it works right now. So the ad industry found other ways to track users aside from cookies, and we'll see how that works with the GDPR and new developments in privacy. There have been a lot of new business models. One I find especially interesting is Frei, which is a browser with an implemented web blocker. That browser has been received quite well, especially in the tech community. But what almost no one knows is that Brave as a business model as well, it's the browser developed by the erstwhile inventor of JavaScript, Brendan Eich, and they have more or less the same business model as IO, with a little twist, because they said, yeah, we'll do this on the blockchain. And as we all know, the blockchain will solve everything, which is why the ad crisis, of course, has been resolved. Well, no. The financing crisis of Brave has been solved because for this blockchain currency, they've gathered 35 million in capital. But the issue is that they have these Brave attention tokens, which can be bought at Brave as an advertiser. And then you're supposed to pay them to circumvent the filter implemented in Brave. The problem is no one wants to pay. No one wants to pay users for viewing ads, and there's a reason for that, to which I'll come back at a later point in this talk. Another nice thing from last year was this nice circle with every side in this blaming the other side for the presidency of Donald Trump. The publishers said, yeah, we don't really have a sustainable business model here, which means they blame the ad blocker industry for the financing crisis, and the ad blocker industry said that publishers just showed a lot of low-quality ads, forcing users to use ad blockers.
So this is one advertising that was on the website of Hamburger Morgenpost, that they didn't notice that an advertisement that looks pretty normal, that leads to an a website that that advertises a very fraudulent blockchain business model. So, and that last year showed that the publishers have lost the control over what is advertised on their website. So, the question is what. Yeah, these fraudulent pop-ups. Your iPhone was compromised, or your Windows system was compromised, and then if you click OK, then you enter your address, and then or you've won an iPhone, and then you enter your address, and then if you read the fine print, then you find out that it's just advertising, and you haven't won an iPhone at all. So Google gave out an ad blocker, which seems really weird, because Google is earning as much money as no other company in the world with online advertising, so that they give us an ad blocker, it's weird. But they said, well, the business doesn't have get the control anymore, and they haven't managed to retain some quality, so Google introduced this ad blocker, and then it turned out that Google, even this world company like Google, this corporation, worldwide corporation, can't really set ad blockers. So if Google, as the leading company for advertising, introduces ad blockers, that might be a problematic business model under legal terms. So if they block advertising, certain advertising, and they don't block others, this might be an antitrust problem. So they tried to gather an alliance from different publishers and media houses and advertisers to participate in that acceptable thing. So Axel Springer decided to join the Coalition for Better Ads, but the result of this was that the members of this alliance weren't happy with this, and the fight increased and escalated when Google said that they wanted to start in February, so we will start in February, and then the other publishing houses blocked it, and we need guarantees that whatever goes through with Google will also be not blocked with other ad blockers. And then Google started, and then in Google in February the rogue ad filter was started. So if you go to a website, if you go to a website that Google declares invalid, then you will get this pop-up. Too many autoplayers and whatever, then you will get this pop-up as blocked, and then you can say, okay, you can still show them the advertisement. And the revolutionary thing about this all is that Google doesn't say we block all advertising, but they say we have a certain threshold. If that is reached, and then we block this. If it isn't reached, then we don't block, and it's very tame, so to say. It's turned out to be so tame that no one has seen this Chrome ad filter in reality. So, a question to the audience: has anybody seen this in their Chrome browser? I don't see any hands, so that's not surprising at all, because they say like 2,000 out of billions of websites are on this list, and they are very unimportant websites. So that also came from the Google really lowering their standards a lot, because one of the reasons to create the Google ad filter is autoplay videos that start with sound. And the question is there to the audience: Who of you hates autoplay videos? Yeah. That's more than 2/3. On the other hand, who says autoplay videos? I understand. I accept this. I can see about 10 hands here. Fighting in the debate about what Google is allowed to do and what not. They said autoplay videos with sound are not allowed. So Google went down there and said, well, okay, then it says, well, it's not allowed, but it's okay if there's a switch. On VT, there's a autoplay button down there. I didn't point it out, but yeah. And that would be okay for the autoplay video. Even if it's there, you can turn it off. So it doesn't wonder me at all that nobody here has ever seen the ad blocker, and we have to wait and see how Google will handle all this, and whether they state, well, it doesn't work, and maybe.
Hat Google gesagt, machen wir das halt im normalen Chrome. Die Coalition for Better als keine Mitspracherechte.
So then Google said, well, okay, we will then just introduce it in Chrome. So the Coalition for Better Ads doesn't have any say in there, and it's just part of the browser. So last year was also that advertising fraud was documented first. So ad fraud was, for example, on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, and these 5,000. You've seen the 5,000 companies earlier on, and there's, this was bought at some company, then passed on to the next and the next and the next marketplace, and then went to Google, and then it was played out by Google, and then Google admitted that they found these fraudulent ads, and therefore it's that's only what they discovered and admitted, is that they have billions of dollars in fraud.
So I'll get to the last part of my talk here, and I would say that ads are the 8th layer on the internet. There are the 7 layers of TCP/IP, and ads have had such great influence on the internet that one cannot imagine the internet without ads anymore, and they have fundamental consequences for the web. For example, just have a look at our social networks. Online advertising is a reason why one social network works and the other one doesn't. For example, if StudiVZ, the social network on Germany, back in the day, if it had had such success at advertising as Facebook has today, it might still be around. We just don't know in hindsight. It's not a universal model for explaining success online, but it certainly has a contribution there. We could see last week how deeply advertising has influenced our online communication now. Let's just look at this. There was a German music award, the Echo, and if you tweeted using the hashtag Echo, you have this little Echo symbol, which was an Amazon ad in your tweet, and no one really noticed it. We were talking about this Echo scandal in Germany. No one said, we have to use a different hashtag for this. Right now it seems that advertisers have noticed and don't really worry about the fact that we don't click it anymore. They just want to be front and center in our attention. And there's also a boom in offline advertising for online media. Here, for example, there's wallpaper advertising podcasts on Amazon, which just displays the podcast hype that's going on right now. The metrics for podcasts have been made public by Apple to show advertisers how many people have listened to the podcast and not skipped the ads in there. And that makes podcasts a lot more attractive to advertisers, which is why we can listen to a lot more podcasts via streaming services right now. Advertising has a lot of influence on our consumption of media, and it's far too simple to just say that advertising has a negative influence on our media consumption. It's just a phenomenon that's so complex that there are positive and negative developments. In every year, we see new developments here with attempts to show ads to people circumventing ad blockers. For example, there are these, it displays in Cologne showing online advertising day and night. And the last thing I have to say is one of the WhatsApp founders leaving Facebook because we can just prepare for advertising entering our direct messaging services. And every one of you who does not use WhatsApp, for example, knows what a large social pressure there can be to use certain messengers. Parents know that playground dates, for example, are organized via WhatsApp. One last point to understand the advertising markets. I would say there are two different advertising markets. Part one wants to sell you as a consumer certain goods, and the other part is Facebook, for example, trying to show their advertisers that our advertising works, our advertising gets people to buy things, and this market is just as prone to error as the first one I mentioned. Here's an example from media journalist Stefan Niggemeier. He liked bento pulls and quartz, which are different media in Germany. And the advertising profile Facebook deducted from that showed that he liked Japanese food and minerals. So we see a lot of self-deception here. The people selling ads on Facebook, for example, are convinced that this kind of market is in the interest of the customer. His Sheryl Sandberg, for example, last year at the Mexico, and she knew in advance of the Cambridge Analytica scandal that was on the horizon, but she just said and saw, yeah, let's just throw some AI at this and everything will work itself out. But as we all know, it didn't work out. I have to hurry up a little bit here. We've heard a lot of artificial intelligence right here on publica. But what we know is that if the test data doesn't work, then artificial intelligence will not lead to reasonable outcome, garbage in, garbage out. And we see here on the example of Facebook's business model that they are using artificial intelligence for their whole ad system, but it works for them financially. So they might just tweet a little about it, give out their media statements, and just play over it and say that everything works for them. So we need to discuss the advertising system. And this is why we should not neglect the whole advertising industry when talking about the open internet. And you all may know this old statement that if you are not paying for a service, then you are really the product. But I'm not so convinced of that. For example, listen again to the keynote given by Dana Boyd. She says that whether algorithms are good or bad depends on the context in which they are implemented. One of the central areas in which machine learning is used is online advertising, and if we do not get talking with Zuckerberg and his likes about this whole issue, then nothing will change. Thank you very much for listening.